Gave me this book, and it's called Holy Moments, a handbook for the rest of your life by Matthew Kelly. This is a book about a monk who was at a monastery, and the monastery used to be full of the monks who were so joyful and happy, and the joy was contagious, and people would always come and visit. But over time, the monks became irritated with their visitors and were more concerned with themselves than others, and jealousy was in the air, and there was one monk that was more handsome than the others, and that's where the jealousy came from. And people stopped visiting as time went on, and nobody visited anymore because of just the negativity there. It was ugly. So one of the monks left to go see this hermit up in the mountains, because lo and behold, that monk and that hermit in the mountains were childhood friends. And he goes and sees this hermit, and when he gets to the hermit's house in the mountains, the hermit's like, "I've been waiting for you." I think the monk was called an abbot. I don't know what that is, because I believe in the one true God, and that is the only religion I follow, so I don't know. But I'm going to get to what I'm getting to, because this is important. The monk who came to visit him, he was going to ask him, what should we do? Because he was going to see the hermit to ask the hermit what should they do to fix this situation, to revitalize the monastery. And the hermit was like, "Wait, I have something to show you." And he took him to this lake. And the lake was here. Let's see here. He walked through the trees to this lake, and after about 15 minutes, a fine lake was before them. It was breathtaking. The hermit sat on a large boulder at the side of the lake, and the abbot sat on a smaller boulder next to him. They sat in silence for over an hour, and the abbot felt a deep peace rising in his soul. The lake was clear and still. The surface was like glass, and the sun was reflecting perfectly on the water like a golden disc. The abbot was memorized. When the sun had reached its pinnacle, the hermit began to speak. "A still pond reflects the sun perfectly. God is the sun. You are the lake. When your soul is still and clear, you reflect the truth, beauty, and goodness of God to everyone you encounter. As the day goes on, the wind will pick up, the lake will be full of ripples, and you will barely be able to see the sun's reflection in the water." After a few minutes, the two men walked back through the cypress trees to the cave. As they sat drinking tea, the abbot described what had happened at the monastery over the past several years. The hermit listened closely. When the abbot had finished asking a handful of clarifying questions. "What have you come here to ask?" Wait a minute. That didn't even make sense. Let me read that again. The hermit listened closely, and when the abbot had finished, asked a handful of clarifying questions. "What have you come here to ask?" was the hermit's last question. "What wisdom do you have for us? How do we rejuvenate the monastery? How can we best serve the people who come to visit?" the abbot asked. "That's 3 questions, the hermit said with a smile so radiant that the abbot had to look away. "I will answer your 3 questions with one answer," the hermit continued. "Go back and tell the brothers, the Messiah is among you." And with that, the hermit closed his eyes and slipped into a deep meditation. "The Messiah is among us. What can that possibly mean?" the abbot mumbled to himself. But as he walked slowly down the mountains, the full meaning of the hermit's words took root deep in his soul. Back at the monastery, the monks were growing concerned. The abbot said he would be gone 3 days, and he had already been gone 5 days. The next evening, when there was still no sign of him, they began discussing what fate might have befallen him. The following morning, Brother Fabian callously suggested he was not coming back either because he had died in the mountains, or because he had abandoned them for some other life. Just as the sun was setting that afternoon, Brother Bartholomew saw a figure approaching the monastery, and cried out, "We have a visitor." It was not a visitor, it was the abbot. He whispered softly to Bartholomew, "Gather everyone in the chapel." The abbot was radiant as he sat before the whole community on a small wooden stool. He looked 10 years younger. The monks could not remember a time when he seemed so fully alive. He told the other monks of his journey and shared with them the message he had received. This is what I asked the hermit. "What wisdom do you have for us? How do we rejuvenate the monastery? How can we best serve the people who come to visit? The hermit replied, that's 3 questions. I will answer your 3 questions with 1 answer. Go back and tell the brothers the Messiah is among you. The monks were astonished and gasped. From that moment on, they looked at each other differently. They thought of each other differently. And they began to treat each other differently. You see what's happening here? The monks wondered day and night who the Messiah among them was. Was it Adrian, Bartholomew, Kilian, Owen, Fabian, or was it the abbot himself? And as the brothers wondered, they began to treat each other with renewed kindness and a profound respect. As time passed, the abbot noticed little things. There was a new spirit of cooperation. The brothers praised and encouraged each other. Compassion and forgiveness returned to their hearts, and they were kind to each other. These little things, the holy moments, breathed new life into the community. The monks were flourishing. The monastery was flourishing. Even the flowers in the field and the cows in the barn seemed happier. Guess what? Even plants. Plants have the same neurons that our brains have. When you're standing next to a flower, it knows what color your shirt is. It is alive, of course, but it is alive in a much more complex way than people know. Let's see here. Wait, I'm not done reading to you. The 2. Yeah. Let's see here. And then one day it happened. The visitors returned. At first, it was just 1 or 2 visitors like it had been in the past, but they brought their friends, and their friends brought their friends. Those that came to visit the monastery noticed that the monks were overflowing with joy. They perceived the monks had a profound reverence for each other, and they observed the monks' unquenchable patience with their visitors. In a few short years, the monastery had been transformed from the brink of collapse and was thriving like never before. A village sprung up around the monastery, and the monastery became the center of life for the people of the village. The monks loved the people, and the people loved the monks. They all lived together in harmony and happiness. One Saturday afternoon, the old abbot was sitting on a bench in the courtyard looking gratefully toward the mountains when a woman approached. Sitting down next to him, she asked, "What happened here?" The old monk beamed his warm, knowing smile and asked, "What do you mean?" "This place has been completely transformed," the woman explained. "No," the abbot disagreed gently. "The place is exactly the same. It's the monks who have changed." "How did it happen?" she asked. "We started living as if the Messiah were among us," the abbot replied. "And those of you who are Christians, you know the Messiah is among us. As the Holy Spirit dwells within us, that is why we have and are supposed to have a reverence and a respect for others. Respect people's boundaries. Respect them as parents, brothers, sisters, sons, daughters, friends, what have you. You are to show other people the same exact respect you would appreciate if it was you in their shoes. And you know it, because the Messiah truly is among us in this story. As you stand before me on the other side of this screen, the Messiah is among us. The woman pondered for that moment and then began to weep. The old monk put his arm around her to comfort her. She told him about her life and troubles. The woman shared with him the question that was tormenting her soul, the question that had urged her to visit the monastery, and they sat in silence for a long time. "What advice do you have for me?" the woman asked, breaking the silence. The two sat quietly for another long moment before the old man spoke, and then he said, "Treat every person you ever meet like the second coming of Jesus in disguise." Listen to this. Let me say that again. Treat every person you ever meet like the second coming of Jesus in disguise. Do you hear me? Treat every person you ever meet like the second coming of Jesus Christ in disguise. That's the end of that story. The next one, actually, I think that was just an intro. Tells you a lot about how good the book is. Here's the next one. Here, I'm going to tell you. See? Oh, this is for somebody. I don't know who it's for. Here you go. You have so much more to offer. You sense it. You may have known it for a long time. It's a truth that lingers, waiting patiently for us to pay attention to it. It's a soul sense. When your soul sense is such a thing, it should never be ignored. You may find yourself thinking or saying, something is missing. There must be more to life. I have so much more to offer. These are sacred truths, but we often treat them as human malfunctions. We think something is wrong. We think we need to be fixed. We view these sacred truths as problems to be solved, and that is a tragedy. When you experience these yearnings, something is very, very right. You are not malfunctioning. Nothing could be further from the truth. Your heart, mind, body, and soul are working together